Welcome to the Moto Marketing Podcast, presented by RacerX, the podcast for moto industry professionals, entrepreneurs, and riders. If you want to grow your brand and business in today's digital-first world, you have to know how to turn a stranger into a fan, turn a like into a customer. You have to know how to turn attention into dollars. This podcast is dedicated to keeping you in the know on real marketing tactics that work in the moto world so that you grow your business and help grow the sport. Get ready to learn from the very same marketing experts trusted by RacerX, Lucas Oil Pro Motocross, GNCC, and NBC Sports. They'll help you navigate the world of digital marketing for your moto brand. This is the Moto Marketing Podcast. Presented by RacerX.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Moto Marketing Podcast. I'm your host, Luke Nestler. Before we dive into today's episode, I want to let you know about the most recent promotion RacerX has going on. At any given time, you can see the most recent promotion. If you're listening to this late, go to racerxonline.com/Moto Marketing. At the time of this podcast, pretty cool promotion package worth up to $2,500. You can win a set of Method wheels and Maxxis tires. Also, you'll get a set of 12 collectible 2021 Lucas Oil Pro Motocross event stickers, something really cool. So be sure to check it out. Again, racerxonline.com/Moto Marketing. Hey, we've got a pretty special guest for you today, and number 3 of the in-studio guests, which I'm excited. We're finally starting to get to utilize the studio more. We've got somebody that I consider a good friend, a mentor, somebody that I'm very appreciative of everything that this person has done for me as far as helping me get into the sport that I love and kind of navigate my business through it. So we've got Davey Coombs, somebody that needs no introduction, but we're going to give him one anyways. Davey has done more than one can count, from creating, obviously, RacerX and seeing RacerX through, when the internet didn't exist, to now really having two complete things to worry about, whether it's print and now digital. Also promoting, the biggest and the best of the amateur races, as well as the professional series in our sport. So, Davey, man, it's an honor to have you in studio. We've had you in studio. You've co-hosted a couple of shows with me, and you interviewed me for the first show that we ever had, kind of introducing this. But I've never actually sat down and had you as a proper guest, and I wanted to do that, man. So I appreciate you being in.
Hey, no problem. It was a really arduous trip to get here.
Yeah.
It was about 12 minutes on my 890 adventure bike, and it was a nice excuse to skip out at lunch.
Exactly. Yeah. It's everybody always asks, "Are you in California?" I'm like, "Nope, we're in Morgantown," and they're like, "Oh, there's 2 moto companies in Morgantown." I'm like, "Well, yeah, I guess that's true." So, I mean, the premise of this show is, obviously, we just kind of talk about the backstory. And man, you've got quite the backstory, and it's really not just you. It's like it's a family affair of just rich motorcycle racing history. You and your brother both were professional athletes. And I'm sure a lot of people have heard this, but there's some folks that are new to this, that listen to the show, that are somewhat young and new to the sport and know who you are, but might not really know your history. So can you kind of just quickly walk us through going from racer to where did RacerX start? And then we'll kind of pick up from there.
Well, I grew up in the family of parents that loved motorcycle racing. My dad saw the movie On Any Sunday and decided that he wanted to get into motocross, and when he realized he was too old to be a racer, he immediately sort of shifted to organizing races and became a promoter. And pretty soon my brother had a mini bike, and then my sister had a mini bike, and then they got handed down to me, and I started racing when I was 6 years old.
Wow.
7 years old, take it back, and raced my whole life, but real seriously up until I finished high school. And at that point, I had, that crossroads that everyone comes to, where it's like I could keep trying to be a professional or a semi-pro or pro-am, but I also kind of read the writing on the wall and knew that I really deep down wanted to be a school teacher or a lawyer. and I decided to focus on college after one semester of not going to college to race dirt bikes. But in that one semester, I got to do Daytona Supercross. I raced in Houston, Pontiac, and I did one outdoor national. I qualified, but I didn't get any points. And then I started focusing on WVU.
Okay.
Went to school, and while I was racing, though, I'd always been a big fan of magazines and newspapers. I read Cycle News every week. I read Motocross Action, Dirt Bike, Popular Cycling, Dirt Rider. I mean, anything that involved motocross, I would devour. And pretty soon I was contributing to some of those publications, starting with a little District 7 newspaper called Cycling East, and then Cycle News, and so on and so forth. And at some point, my dad talked me into, or maybe that's not the right word, my mom guided me into doing the High Point event program. And I think that was 1986. And that was my first publishing gig. And then from there, it turned into a district newspaper. And then from there, it turned into not only the programs, but a glossy, national newspaper. And finally, in 1998, in the spring, we pulled the trigger on doing a glossy, full-color magazine, and that became what is now Racer X.
Yeah. Man, so you said you thought about being a school teacher. Now, knowing you're probably the biggest history buff and fan of history. Is that what you would have done?
Yeah, almost certainly. My dad was a high school and junior high history teacher.
Oh, okay.
My mom was a math and English teacher, and so I just thought that's what I wanted to do. And my sister became a lawyer, and she's older than me, so I kind of was thinking one or the other. And to this day, I plan on going back and teaching school when I retire.
Really?
When I get some time.
That's
because I just, especially in the world we live in now with the podcast and all the things that are available, and I've always loved driving to the races. I love it even more now because once I devour all the good, moto podcasts, and there's a bunch of them now, I'm listening to Dan Carlin's Hardcore History, or History That Doesn't Suck, or American History Storytellers. And I love telling stories about and reading stories and listening to stories about history. And all of that sort of goes back to the idea that I had thought I was going to be a school teacher. And it's still a passion of mine.
Yeah.
And I've been lucky enough to, because of my job, first as a racer and then as a publisher and a reporter, I've got to go to some pretty cool places like the beaches of Normandy, the Waterloo battleground, a few places World War I like the Somme and Verdun. I know that there's just a small group of people listening to this that might recognize all those places, but if you're a history buff, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And plus, when you live in Morgantown, West Virginia, you're literally straddling American history.
Yeah.
Because the Mason-Dixon line, the demarcation between North and South for the start of the Civil War, it's about 3 minutes from my house.
Yeah.
So you grow up on both sides of the Civil War, going to Gettysburg and Antietam and Harper's Ferry and all those places. And so it's just an ongoing passion. And I know it sounds funny that someone involved in the motocross business would want to quit to go teach school, and it's not that. It's just that I've always, if I could figure out a way to do it right now, I would do it. I'm just too busy right now, but give me a few years.
Well, I think that's, for those that may not have known how into history you are, I think that makes a lot of sense for your style of storytelling and your style of writing. Like the content in the magazine and online that is the history of our sport, yours is the best, and that makes sense because and anybody that has ever benched raced with you knows you're just a wealth of knowledge, and it's not just because you're a fan of moto, but you're a fan of history, and I think you tie moto into that as well.
I'm very lucky that I'm blessed with a pretty good memory, and so is my sister and my mom have like photographic memories. I don't know how they do it, but when it comes to results and numbers and who won what and who did what and who rode where, I have a pretty good recollection of that. And but because I've gotten older, I've been around this for most of my life, I have found that, even though I can totally relate and appreciate someone like Jet Lawrence or Jalik Swoll or even some of the younger kids coming up like Ryder D and Hayden Deegan, I don't have a lot of common ground with them, other than I know what TikTok is because my daughter's on it, and I know what Instagram is because I like to post signs on it. But my style of race reporting is kind of changed, and there are younger guys that do know them, that do grow up with them, that do follow them and have a lot more in common, that do sort of the more contemporary stuff. And it's funny, Jason Wygant and I have had this conversation, and I've mentioned it a few times before, that one of the things that's happening in motocross journalism, and I would say all kinds of journalism, is that people are losing the desire and really the skill of long form writing. Everyone writes in captions. Everyone writes in 144 character tweets or Instagram posts, and there's never been more great photographers and videographers than we have right now in motocross and supercross. And only I say that because Simon Cudby's still part of it, and Chris Holtner's still part of it, and Frank Kuhns and Paul Buckley are still part of it. But the new kids coming up, with the equipment they have, with the access they have, and with the platforms they have, it's amazing. Yeah. But the opposite side of that is the fact that there's not a lot of people writing anymore.
Right.
And a magazine is still, we like doing deep dives into stories. Mathis just did a story that hasn't dropped yet about the history of the U.S. Open of Supercross. It's 20,000 words.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, that is an entire issue of Racer X.
Yeah.
So we have no choice but to put it online and excerpt it in the magazine. But, I think once that, guys like Weege, Michael Antonovich, who's really good at Swap Moto Live, Dawn, Mathis, we're starting to kind of run out of old school, roll up your sleeves and held a tape recorder out like Eric Johnson and I have been doing since the early 90s. That's going away with that sort of style of media.
Yeah, for sure. Like when you're looking at somebody like Hayden Deegan being a vet in the sport and he's on the cusp of retirement, I feel like when that time rolls around, it is going to look very different than it does now. And now it looks very different than when, you were kind of early in your career. Talk to me about that, because one of the things, obviously I'm a massive fan of Racer X. We do a lot of stuff with you, and the brand is near and dear to my heart being from this area. But, I mean, even though my opinion is biased, like Racer X has done something pretty special to where print media has changed drastically, and the amount of motorcycle, dirt bike racing magazines on the stand now compared to, early to mid 90s, late 90s, it's very different. Racer X still is there and is not just relevant but thriving. And you guys also have a digital component, and there's all different types of content that comes with that. You saw Transworld go away and Swap came back and is doing his own thing, but he's not doing print. He's just doing digital. Talk to me about, beyond you just being a fan of digital and probably saying, look, this is here to stay. Like I still, even though I'm on my phone all the time, I still lay in bed and I read the print issue of Racer X. I see it on the newsstands. What do you think has gone into making the Racer X brand what it is to where it's survived a transition that has killed a lot lot of print?
Well, that's a complex question.
I know it is.
If I had all the answers. First of all, it has changed dramatically. And you talk about you still find it on the newsstand. The hard part's finding newsstands. Yeah. The distribution is changing rapidly, and because of that, so is the expectation of where to get it, how to get it. But honestly, Luke, I had Brian Steely with me for many years. Mm-hmm. And Brian started out in the mail room when we were doing the newspaper out at the farmhouse on Harner Run. And he came up with an idea one day, and this is 1996 or 7, before the magazine started. He said, we need a website. And I was like, oh, is that one of those things where you get emails? because I'd never gotten an email before. I didn't. It was just all kind of breaking. And he's like, let me look into it. And 2 months later, he comes back and he opens his computer and says, look, we got a website. And right away, we embraced it because I could see where it was going. And even though my dad wouldn't get to see anything beyond the first 3 issues of the magazine, he was very astute when it came to things like media. And he had told me, and I don't actually practice this, but he said, if you're in media, you always want to be the oldest person in your company because things are going to change. And they're going to change so rapidly that you're going to miss them. And other people, younger people, are going to be like, oh, we don't do that anymore. And I don't think he could have foreseen iPhones and Instagram and social media. He just thought that, Racer X was a lifestyle magazine. It was meant toward sort of a younger demographic, not all the tech stuff and the hard part stuff and the shootout stuff. There were other magazines that were doing a great job of that. We wanted to be a lifestyle piece. We wanted to be that thing that someone would lay on their, desk or their coffee table and say, hey, this is what I do. This is the world that I live in because I race motocross or I work in the motocross industry or I'm a motocross fan. And we've maintained that throughout. But we've also been, I think, very proud of everyone I work with this because I didn't know these things, but they pick up on a trend. They figure out which wave's coming, and we follow it. I had made the joke a few years back that I was drawing the line at Twitter. I was not going to tweet, and I don't. But then I did get into Instagram, so that's my age. I'm Facebook and Instagram. That's it. But I have 2 children. Vance is 19 and a college student studying new media here at WVU, and my daughter Sloan is soon to be 14. And I see how to consume media from them. And you probably know this from the people that you love and work with. The generation that's teenagers right now has never watched a TV show at 9 o'clock on a Thursday night because it came on at 9 o'clock on a Thursday night. They watch it on their phones and they watch it whenever the hell they want.
Well, and I mean, even like something that has tripped me out, my sister-in-law is 18 and she'll say, I was texting my friends. Even text message, they don't actually text. When she says text, they're sending Snapchat messages. So things that are even like my grandma, if she were still alive, would have a hard time saying it. They don't even send text. It's messaging through these social platforms to where, and I feel like, and that's not just her, that's a shift. If you probably ask your kids, like they probably communicate through those platforms and a lot of it through image more so than just sending a message. I like it's getting to the point to where me at 32, I'm like, that's weird.
Luke, I shot a video at Loretta Lynn's a couple years ago of a kid named, I think his name was Jordan Smith, launching an RM80 on the big jump in the middle, the monster infield jump. And it went viral. And I had like 300,000 people look at it. And I thought, oh man, that's so awesome. And one day my daughter is like, have you seen Vance's latest TikTok? And I'm like, no. And she's like, he's got a lot of views. You should check it out. It had 2.5 million views, and it was a chord. It's a long story.
Yeah, I've seen his stuff.
Yeah, and very very funny, sardonic humor. But anyway, I don't know where it's going, but I've positioned myself in a way that I like to think that just as we caught a wave with the internet, and then we caught a wave with social media, and then we caught a wave with podcasting. Everything that comes along, we're looking at and we're studying, but we don't ever want to lose the flagship, which is the printed magazine. And we're lucky that it's kind of become a legacy piece in the industry. And by that, I mean, it'll be 25 years here pretty soon. And I think that there so many people have come back to the sport. Not that they're racing again, but they're watching again. Their kids are racing. And, they really like, the long form stories that we tell in the magazine. And so it used to be that we would use the internet, the website, for 29 days out of every month to basically remind people the magazine's coming out on the 30th day. You got to go get it. That's now changed to where the magazine is the companion piece to the internet. Our social media presence, the internet, Facebook, all the different things we do, those are endless.
Yeah.
They're infinite and they're continuous. The magazine is more like a hard stop every month, and like, it's more of a take your time, think about it, enjoy it.
It's more art now than maybe it was before. Is that right?
But that's fair to say, sure, because you have to do something to attract, people that aren't normally buying magazines. But the idea that we use the magazine to remind people that whether they still race or not, their investment of their time, of their vacations, of their extra dollars to buy motorcycles and motorcycle parts and motorcycle gear and a pickup truck and go racing. We like to remind them of those days and that commitment and remind them that it was worth it, because I don't think there's a better thing you can do as far as sports goes with your family than race dirt bikes. Racing bicycles is close, but because motocross is kind of my main thing, I'm trying to get my head wrapped around e-mountain bikes. I know that your team's doing really well. If you're looking for a tweener girl for the whatever class they would have for tweener girls on a specialized bicycle, Sloan rides every day
on her e-bike.
That's
awesome.
Just loves it when she's not doing volleyball. But anyway, to I guess to round off the question, we've stayed relevant because we focused on the racing. We focus on the results. We focus on the personalities, and those are constantly changing and evolving. And that's the creative side. On the back end, we had people like Brian who helped steer us for the longest time. And now, whether it's Wygant or Andrew Fredrickson, Mathis, Mitch, all of our contributors, we're open to ideas, suggestions. And if someone says, we might need you on Twitter, well, I'll draw the line there.
Exactly.
But if we are looking for a TikTok guy, I know a couple kids that live in my house that are pretty good at it.
Yeah, I feel like your street is filled with TikTok celebrities. Somebody that that works for us, his daughter is literally TikTok. She's a TikTok celebrity, and it blows them away. Man, it's so hard. It's such a hard conversation to have with you as far as like everything you've done and the amount of time these shows normally are, because you've done everything. So I want to kind of make a hard transition from the magazine, because I feel like when people see you at Supercrosses and whatnot, like, it's funny, like we live in Little Morgantown, and we just talked about, for those watching, there's a Suzuki a gas tank behind me, and Davey was talking about a gentleman that he sees riding what year is it? A
74 TM 125.
And Davey stalked him one day and found him, and the guy he was like, do you work in, and Davey said, I work in Moto, and he told him about Racer. I said, oh, I've heard of you. Now, if that said Anaheim 1, people are stopping and getting selfies with you, so they know you as the Racer X guy, and you've been on television and things like that. But you have such a big role, but you're pretty quiet and behind the scenes as far as being the face of things like Lucas Oil Pro Motocross and everything you do there, and then GNCC. I want to talk about motocross, but I want to talk about GNCC. Can you like, I've always actually wondered this myself. Where did that come from? Because it is the premier off-road racing for motorcycles, ATVs, now e-bikes. It's massive, and I've never really heard the story of where that comes from, and I have a feeling there's somewhere in there that's where Carrie goes from just being a lawyer to like the queen of MX Sports and what she does now. Can you tell us how that happened?
Well, she would strangle you if she heard you call her the queen.
I don't. She's probably going to strangle me a few times.
Boss. The boss.
Okay.
Like a lot of things in our lives, it began with my dad. He was promoting local motocross events at Appalachia Lake in 1974, 75, and a preacher from a little town called Davis, West Virginia, approached him and said, hey, and serendipitously, he saw the movie On Any Sunday too. And he said he had interest in bringing an event like the Lake Elsinore Grand Prix, which is the movie that, Malcolm Smith and Steve McQueen famously participate in, a race through a retirement community in Southern California. And he said that he wanted to do that for the town of Davis. And Dad said, well, you don't just, race up and down the streets of a town like that. And the guy said, in Davis you could. And a year later, we had the Blackwater 100. And the Blackwater 100 was a notoriously difficult, fun weekend, and it turned into quite the party to the point where it sort of outgrew itself because you couldn't charge admission because it was held on public land about 2 hours from here. And it finally went away in 1994. The environmentalists had convinced people there that the Canadian snipe that migrates through every 2 weeks would bring a giant bird watching population. On and on and on. Now it's a wasteland. It's a prison. It's been mined again. I hate to say that, but we quit going. But by that time in 1994, Dad had grown that one race into a series, and it started out as the National Hare Scramble Series in '78, and then it became the 100-miler series by '83, and then it morphed into Grand National Cross Country Series a little while later in the 80s.
Did you have a stop at Big Bear as
well?
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Some of those, the Pines is the section they call it.
Yeah.
And there's still the berms that I'm riding it on my e-bike, and I didn't realize that you guys had that race there at the time. And I'm like, these berms are like they're moto berms. And Colin Dearman, who runs Walmsley Cycles, is like, yeah, they used to have the 100-miler series here. It's still there.
Oh yeah,
it's been years.
But the places like we had races at Seven Springs on the ski resort, down at the what's the one at the bottom of West Virginia? There's ski resort below Beckley. We did Winter Place.
Winter Place.
The series started out almost entirely in West Virginia, and then Pennsylvania and Maryland, and it grew into this massive juggernaut, I guess you'd say, of ATVs and motorcycles, and now e-mountain bikes, and the little Stasics are hilarious. There's so much talent out there because all those little kids are the children of Thad Duvall and Caleb Russell.
I was going to say
and really good fast kids that are going to be racing. The next Aaron Plessinger is probably riding a Stasic right now.
Yeah. When did it get to the point that it became a professional sport to where there are guys that do this for a career, the OEMs get involved? How did they go from just the local to like it went national and then boom, it pops, it's a new sport?
I think that you could trace that back to one guy. His name is Scott Summers. He was from Kentucky, and Scott had a gimmick that no one else had. He was racing an XR600 Honda 4-stroke when everyone else was racing 250cc 2-strokes. He also had a partner in his mechanic / agent, a guy named Fred Bramblett, a fascinating, brilliant guy. And they kind of convinced Honda to support them as a, quote unquote, off-road factory Honda rider, even though it was Scott's box van. Fred painted it, and they would go around with their own autograph stock and everything. But the thing is, he started winning, and as the series grew, so did Scott Summers' name cachet and his equity as an off-road star. And I truly believe that, with the exception of Malcolm Smith, that Scott Summers, you could make a case that he was one of the most influential off-road motorcyclists of all time, because no one made a living racing off-road and just racing. There are legends like Dick Burleson, but he actually worked at Husqvarna. Rod Bush, but he actually worked at KTM. The Rosso brothers, they all had real full-time jobs. Summers was the first one who figured out a way to sell himself, market himself, get sponsors like the White Brothers and Answer Racing and Al Baker products and Arai helmets and goggles, and suddenly he was a full-time off-road racer.
Yeah. And
that was late 80s, early 90s, and it just grew from there. And then you began getting people like Larry Rosler, Ty Davis, the late Danny Hamill out in California. And then guys on the East Coast, like, Ed Lojack was older than Scott Summers. In fact, Scott Summers usurped Ed Lojack as the GNCC champion. Ed worked in a bike shop. The money wasn't there until the sport began to grow and began to get on TV. Yeah, and I think that GNCC had a lot to do with that. But so did magazines like Dirt Bike and Dirt Rider. And people like Super Hunky and Tom Wolfman Webb, because they would, they turned off-roading from a sort of, hey, this is what you do when you go to Daytona and do the Alligator Enduro, into a lifestyle thing. They made it cool.
Yeah, I feel like the sport has changed. Like I always knew who Barry Hawk was, but as a kid, like I'm. In comparison to a lot of people in the sport, I'm young in the sport. Like I came in and really fell in love with the sport when Stu was coming up and Carmichael was already on 250s. So, and that was what I paid attention to, Supercross, Motocross. I always knew who Barry Hawk was, and that was kind of the extent of my knowledge. And as I've gotten much more involved with obviously you guys being a client, but then even more so with me being at the races, because the e-bike team, I've heard people talk about how the sport has changed from like they would ride at a fast pace for 2.5 hours and then they would sprint for the last 30 minutes. And then I feel like similar to how Carmichael changed, it went from a party sport to training. Did Caleb have a similar effect on that? Because everybody talks about how it is a full-out sprint now for 3 hours and how it kind of transitioned when maybe Charlie Mullins and Caleb, like, did you also see that in your eyes? Like it really elevated at a certain period?
That's a good question, and Caleb being nephew and all. Yeah. I don't want to give him all the credit, but I think that there was an evolution, and guys in the 80s and 90s like Summers and Lojack and Scott Plessinger, Aaron's dad, who's going in the AMA Motorcycle Hall of Fame here shortly. Mark Hyde, and of course Dick Burleson. They all had something to do with the evolution, but and then the influx of motocrossers in the mid '90s when you had Fred Andrews, Guy Cooper, the great Rodney Smith, also in the Hall of Fame, Ty Davis. There were a lot of guys who knew how to sprint, and it just got to the point where, like, who's going to be able to tie this all together? And then a really unique thing happened, and it happened 3 times. KTM began importing these wildly talented guys like Shane Watts, Juha Solomon, David Knight, and they were just better on dirt bikes than the Americans were. And so it was going to take, just like the Ricky thing, someone to outwork those guys, because it was going to be hard to out-talent them. And that's where I think Charlie, Caleb, Josh Strang, who's all actually from Australia, that's where they kind of came into their own. And now, this past weekend, I was filming at the GNCC at the Burr Oaks down in Ohio. So I had the starting cam, because I still work on the film crew when they need me.
That's the thing people don't realize about Davey Coombs is he still gets dirty, and like in the middle of nowhere, Ohio, to GNCC.
It was a great trip because Vance came and worked a camera. I worked another camera because they needed us for the Racer TV crew. And then as soon as the ATV race was over, we went to the Texas Roadhouse in Athens, watched WVU almost beat Oklahoma, and had a great time. And then got up on Sunday morning and went back to filming. Anyway, so after the race, and it was gnarly. Stu Baylor and Ben Kelly, and they were going at it, hammer and tong, as Art Ekman would say. And afterwards, Stu outlasted him, and Ben said, "Man, it was wide open the whole time. I can't believe we were on the bikes the whole time. Although he crashed pretty hard at one point." And it dawned on me that I had just watched a 3-hour moto.
Yeah.
Because it's
incredible.
And so I don't know that there's that one moment where you could say, oh, this is what changed it. Yeah. Like the time Doug Henry showed up in Florida, sprinted the whole way, won and said, I'm never racing one of these again. Because he was completely knackered, but because he raced it like a motocross. It's just evolved to that point.
Yeah. And
it's funny, the only time I can think of one moment where you could point at something and say that's when it all changed. We could talk about the Bubba scrub. You talked about that when he uncorked that in 2003 at Budds Creek, or you could talk about David Bailey and Johnny O'Mara playwriting out at Hondaland in the 80s. The only time I think I've ever witnessed a true paradigm shift was when Jeremy McGrath got on a 250 in 1993 and started low jumping. And what he was doing, and you know this from BMX, he was soaking up the jump on takeoff by blasting into it. Instead of preloading and launching, he was hitting it at speed, scrubbing up the altitude with his legs and staying low. And he would do that, and he'd save 1/10 of a second off each jump. Well, if you have 30 jumps around a Supercross track, he was 3 seconds a lap faster, and no one could figure out what he was doing. And he said, I'm riding it like a BMX bike.
Yeah.
Everyone ran out and bought BMX bikes. And pretty soon, if you look at Supercross in 1992 with Bradshaw, Stanton, Bale, Wardy, Kudrowski, they were riding a different way. That changes in January of 1993. And by the time you get to the end of McGrath's career, everybody is riding like that. Yeah. With Ricky, it was more of a gradual thing, the training. He was a dominant but wild 125 rider. And then once he surpassed McGrath in 01, then he just dominated for 5 years, mostly. That's when everyone that followed picked up on, I can't be Kevin Windham. I can't be Chad Reed. I can't be James Stewart. Yep. I've got to be those guys plus Ricky. I've got to be as good as they are talent-wise and work as hard as Ricky does off the track to be that guy. And now I think you see that in every single top pro out there. No one is doing it on talent alone anymore. You're doing it because it's a full package.
Yeah. It's cool to see sports evolve. And you've been through your fair share of that. I think kind of transitioning over to the moto side of things, not so much going back to the history of it and MX sports and everything you guys are doing in it, but kind of where it's at now in the future. So obviously COVID forced some pretty incredible adaptations for Supercross in 2020, still some we saw in 21, and now as long as COVID doesn't spoil the party, it looks like Supercross is going to look more like it normally does in 2022. Similar with motocross, you guys had a very weird looking season last year, much more of a normal looking season this year, but I hear, whether it's on the Pulp Show or just people on social media kind of giving their suggestions of things that you guys had to change because of COVID and there was a 3-week break this year. Like, are there some things that COVID forced you guys to do that maybe you see being more of a permanent thing moving forward, or do you think the series, I guess a good example this year is there was a longer break between Supercross and Motocross. Is that something, or are there other things that might get implemented as the sport was forced to evolve for a short period of time? What are your thoughts on that, if you can speak to it?
Yeah, I think I can. Everyone enjoyed the break between Supercross and Motocross, there's no doubt. They also didn't mind us going into September, which we did this year. I think you'll see both of those. I also think, and this is one that no one, I think, realized that they were seeing until it happened. We didn't have anything to entertain our fans during the restrictions of 2020. And that goes for Supercross and Motocross. And we decided to become much more lenient, at least we convinced the network, NBC, to let guys use footage to market themselves. And it was a way to just, we couldn't keep running old things and whatnot. And we started working much more closer with the riders, the race teams, and letting them do things like vlogs and video race reports. And suddenly, and again, this was necessity, trying to find a way to keep people interested, to remind them that there's still going to be a series. We just don't know when.
Yeah.
And what we found is so many people became so adept at social media that rather than just keeping it all in-house, why not spread the wealth and spread the media and let guys, use stuff? Because so many people follow Ken Roxon, so many people follow Jet Lawrence, Cooper Webb, all the top guys. Why not arm them with footage and help them to promote themselves and thus promote the sport? Exactly. We're all in this together.
Yeah.
And I think we had to convince the network that was something, because networks always hold footage really closely, really tightly. That's why after a big UFC fight or a big World Cup match, you go on ESPN and you see still photos, but you don't see actual footage. Yeah. Because the networks are still in that mindset of not really letting people, even athletes that are involved, do it. But if you look at the social media following that a lot of NBA players have, the NBA said, man, we got to let these guys have game footage.
Yeah.
And now, you can see all the cool things that these guys are doing.
Yeah, so like what Adam is doing, Cincerillo's doing with his, I mean, he's kind of late to the game, but there's a lot of others, but...
Yeah, they're Dean Wilson, Adam,
Alex Martin.
Chase, the troll train, Chase Sexton.
Chase, the monster stuff that they're putting together is really good.
And so I guess, put it this way, if I asked, and I did ask my kids who their favorite motocross rider was, my daughter said Axel Hodges. And I was blown away. But it's because she was there at Loretta Lynn's. She saw him do a show that Monster put on in the infield, and she was blown away. She'd never seen someone free ride like that, because I've never taken her to a freestyle contest. Mm-hmm. They don't really exist like they used to. She started following him on social media, and it blew me away. And here's a guy that has a 250 C-Class championship at Loretta Lynn's. My daughter is surrounded by, she knows and has gone on vacation with Jeremy McGrath and Ken Block and has been to Pastrana's house and all these different things.
Has no clue what that means.
But
that's crazy.
Axel Hodges, because she follows him on social media and she thinks he's cool. And so
similar with Brian Deegan being Hayden Deegan's dad, or the guy on YouTube, and having no idea that he's this like icon in the freestyle space.
Exactly. And so I think that's something that changed for the better. Mm-hmm. But as far as I hate the fact that the pits have been closed for 2 years. Mm-hmm. But a lot of the teams and the riders like it. I hate that we haven't been doing media days, because we're trying to limit the amount of time the teams are on the road at their request. And they kind of like it. But so I don't think anything will go back to the way it was specifically in 2019. But I think that there are good things and things that some people aren't going to like that came out of it. And when I say aren't going to like, they might not like if the pits are closed moving forward. I will fight all I can to open them back up.
Yeah,
because I was that kid going around trying to get plastic. Although back then it was actually Preston Penny fenders, and so, but the maybe the other best thing that happened that no one may have seen, but they're probably starting to notice it now, is coincidentally right before COVID hit in March of 2020, we had a meeting, MX Sports, with AMA Pro Racing and Feld Motorsports. And we met and we'd not really worked closely together for a long time. There was always sort of this, I don't want to say a rivalry, but sort of a fear of, what's going to happen. Are they going to expand to Europe, or are we going to go to super speedways? And it was like, hey, we're really happy with these 12 races that we have, and we're not looking to do more. And they're like, well, we're not looking to go to Europe anymore, and we know what our limits are, and maybe we should start working closer together on things like a common rule book, a common license to bring the cost down for the riders, different things like that. And that was the last race. That was the Friday before Daytona. A week later, Indianapolis is canceled. The whole world is falling apart because of COVID. Everything is shut down. No one knows what to do. And again, we got together with Feld and said, we're going to start a safe to race task force. We're going to figure out how to work together, how help promoters get races back on track, whether it's a car race, a go-kart race, a bicycle race. And that was a thing that happened out of desperation. But now we work really closely together.
Yeah.
Feld is no longer co-sanctioned by the FIM, which really helps clear things up here in America. There's no more World Supercross Series, as it were. We're working with them on their Supercross Futures program. We're sharing assets and content. We're on the same network. It's really begun us to help us lift that proverbial tide lifts all the boats. We're coming off a record year in pro motocross for crowds, for eyeballs on screens, for social media interaction, for everything. And I feel that Feld Supercross is going to be the beneficiary of that once they start in January, because the restrictions came down back in April and May as far as outdoor events go, and we were able to sell all the tickets at all of our events, and it was fantastic to have those crowds back. Feld didn't get to do that last year, but I believe that they will in 2022, and for that reason, I truly think that the Monster Energy AMA Supercross Series of 2022 will smash records.
Yeah,
I think they'll have more people watching on TV, more people in the stands, and it's going to be a really good thing. We all have seen the revitalization of outdoor motorsports activity, whether it's e-mountain bikes, whether it's GNCC, which record-breaking year, whether it was Loretta Lynn's record-breaking year, whether it's pro motocross.
Yeah.
And I think that Supercross will finally get the chance to follow suit, because you have to take your hats off to them. They've taken a beating the last couple of years because of the restrictions, given that they happen in stadiums, and given where the calendar was when COVID hit and how it was still here in the spring. And hopefully it's not going to come back. Hopefully we're turning corners. But they deserve a smash hit, and I really hope they get it.
Yeah, I agree. I think if all things continue in a positive direction, it'll be cool to see and hear the crowds at a Supercross. I know the riders probably miss it, and Feld, you talk about as far as a business model, the last couple of years didn't make a whole lot of sense for them, and they kept it going. So I hope so as well. You'd mentioned Loretta Lynn's. You have the shirt on. I don't want to wrap up today without talking about obviously what happened at Loretta Lynn's, what's going on now, what can people do to help? Is there still things that we can do to help? Do you mind to speak to that? Because I know that's obviously a place that's near and dear to your heart.
Absolutely. In late August, literally a week after the ATV race.
This gives me goosebumps.
Yeah, a flash flood hit. They had a record amount of rain in a 24-hour period, and it happened to fall in the same valley that the town of Waverly is in, up above it though, and came down through. It washed out the town. It washed out the racetrack at Loretta Lynn's. It destroyed all the structures there and whatnot. That's no big deal. It cost 20 people their lives, including the ranch foreman who had been there for 38 years. He'd been there as long as motocross. It was a terrible situation. The track floods all the time. It's in a river bottom, but it's no big deal. But this flood was so massive it flooded the town. We will rebuild the track. Loretta Lynn herself, her family, they're fine. But the community that opens their arms to motocross, to the ATV folks, to pro motocross last year, a lot of them lost everything. So, under Tim Cotter's leadership and my sister Carrie and Roy Jansen, we rolled up our sleeves, got to work on racers for Waverly, and asked the industry, people that have been going there for 4 decades. Literally 3 generations of riders have gone through there to do what they could. And a lot of the pro riders did some amazing things. I mean, Jet Lawrence, who raced there one time as a kid, donating his prize money when he won the Ironman National was just that gives me goosebumps now. I had a tear in my eye when I went over to thank him,
because that's a lot of money for people that don't know exactly how much they make as a prize. That's a lot of money. But people donating jerseys and gear, and then American Honda, KTM, Husqvarna, Gas. They all have given generously. And this weekend,
Yamaha from the corporate headquarters, which are now in Georgia, are going there to work all weekend, and not at the ranch. They're going to work in Waverly. They're going to they're taking a caravan up. A bunch of people are going to be there, and I just think things like that are absolutely wonderful. And then finally, Road to Recovery. Lori Armstead, who runs it, has been helping us, pull the money together, working on a case-by-case basis with the people in need in Waverly. You can petition, you can go on the website and whatnot, and then we're working, of course, with the United Way. And Loretta herself did a benefit concert with some of her friends that raised almost $1 million. I'm very proud to say the motocross industry, I think we're getting close to $400,000 that we've raised for that community. And we still have lots of bicycles and motorcycles and stuff to raffle off. And I got to give a shout out to Steve Mathis and the Pulp MX Nation fans. He raffled off a Yamaha YZ that the Yamaha gave him. And it's $40,000.
Yeah,
I mean they raised a ton of money. To give to the people that all they do is roll out the red carpet. They work in the restaurants, gas stations. They work security. They flag. Those are the people that they're the hidden heroes of Loretta Lynn's every year. And a lot of times people get to know them.
Yeah,
if you're in one section watching every year, you see the same people year after year. And that was the thing about Wayne. He was the gentleman who was washed away down on the starting line. He was trying to move a tractor. When the wall of water hit, it knocked the tractor over. He ended up in the starting gate structure holding on, and they had a rope around him and did everything they could to save him. But then the structure blew away or was washed away, and he didn't make it. And I had people calling me saying, "Is that the guy on the horse? Is that the guy who drives around in the Jeep? Is that?" And yeah, it's Wayne. And it's terrible to think. And had that thing come 2 weeks earlier, we'd be having a much different podcast.
Yeah.
And I might not even be here.
Yeah.
That was a brutal thing that hit that area. So the people that are helping, you can go to Road to Recovery. There's a tab there. There's still all kinds of items to auction off. We'll be rolling out more things. Just last weekend, my buddy Jeff Cernick, at his Travis Pastrana Challenge up at Pleasure Valley Raceway, raised a bunch of money, had an auction. Things like that are happening all over the country because, with motocross, we race in different districts, we race different bikes, we know different people, but we all know Loretta Lynn's. And that place is a special place, not for MX Sports, but for anybody who's gone there and spent a week with their family or just had the opportunity to stop by and check out the track. And, like I said, we'll rebuild the track. It's Waverly that needs help.
Yeah. Yeah, it's important, and obviously, like you said, they open the town opens its arms to us and anything that we can do to help. And I know a lot of people have, but this podcast is going to go out still at a time that's very relevant to what's going on down there. So I wanted to be sure, Davey. And it's always a treat to be able to get a chat with you. And it's been such a busy year. Normally we'll grab a glass of wine. I think the last time you and I have actually
it was this time last year.
Yeah, I was gonna say it was the Pit Bike Moto Fight Club.
Oh, that's
it. Might have you might have been in here for a couple of episodes, but the last time we actually got to have a conversation, I really think it was this winter at Bitus's thing in Ohio, which I hope they do that again. That was some of the most fun I've ever had. I was terrified of the whoops. Yeah. I've never hit whoops in my life or ridden a pit bike on a track. And then here we got and we race, and man, it was a blast. So hopefully, Rob, we need to do that again.
Yeah, that was actually the first Moto Fight Club was in Youngstown. That one was in Butler, PA.
Yeah, Butler, PA. Yeah, that's right.
That we did, and there's one coming up next week.
Yeah,
down
the Moto car. Randy Richardson's doing it.
Yeah, Travelers Rest, South Carolina.
Yeah,
I saw Guy B's going to do it.
Yeah,
and they had talked to me about doing it, but
I figured.
I got to drive NASCAR a couple times, and by that I don't mean raced. I did the Richard Petty School for a media thing, And I was dead last each time. I got beat by Leanne Tweeden, and just I'm a horrible.
That's a name I haven't heard in a long time.
I'm a horrible car driver.
Oh, that's funny.
And so I was like, I don't want to drive to South Carolina and get lapped. A pit bike I can do, but a car.
Yeah, I hear you. Well, man, it's thank you for making time to come over. It's I appreciate everything you've done and in allowing people to enjoy this show. If it wasn't for you guys saying, yeah, you can put your silly show on here and people actually listen to it, which I'm surprised. So I appreciate it.
It's a lot of fun, and I appreciate you doing this. And, I'd written a column a few months ago about how, back to media just for a second, how it's all changing. And, man, there's so much good content now online. And I don't care if it's, Mathis's stuff is amazing. Daniel Blair's main event, the Jason Wygant. Literally, you could say, Jason, talk about this James Stewart toy bike on Luke's desk for 1 hour. And he would absolutely filibuster it and do it perfectly. But like, I've gotten to the point where I'm listening to Gypsy Tales. I listen to Ping and GL when they do the Whiskey Throttle show, and that's one thing we in the pandemic we all figured out. We found new things, whether it was a way to attach ourselves to our sport or our general interest. And we're like in the golden age of new media for motocross and supercross. There's something
every day. To watch, read, listen to every single day. Even through the off season.
And I'm starting to do MX Vice, over in Europe. And anyway, it's funny that we're, all those magazines that we grew up with are gone. For the most part. There's still MXA, there's still Dirt Bike, there's still Racer X. But, in the 70s, 80s, there were so many, and that's gone. But there's so many new forms of media that it's ridiculous. It's a great time to be a fan.
Yeah.
And when things get back to normal, it's going to be a really great time to be a fan.
Absolutely. Well, guys, I'm sure this isn't the last time we'll have Davey on, but I definitely wanted to get him in. We're approaching show 100, and I thought great time to have him come in. So, Davey, again, thank you. Thanks for everybody listening, watching. Again, if you don't subscribe to Racer X, I think this was a great reason why you should. Be sure to go to racerxonline.com/Moto Marketing. You can always see what their latest promotion is, and we'll see you guys next week.
Thank you for listening to the Moto Marketing Podcast. If your goal is to get real, measurable results from your marketing that will grow your company revenue, then check out how Impact Media can get the same results that they have for Moto's most iconic brands by visiting thinkimpact.com. That's THINKIMPAKT.com. Have a marketing question that you want answered on the show? Send your questions to questions@motomarketingpodcast.com. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. And we'll catch you on the next episode of the Moto Marketing Podcast.